All right, everybody. Well, welcome. So glad that you are here, and so glad to be with my longtime friend David, who's just absolutely a great marketing mind, a good friend, a spiritual person like myself, and I don't know, just a good guy and smart TikTok advertiser. So I'm excited that we're able to talk about all this today. And I have Courtney Alexander here as well from the Foxwell Digital team, who is an incredible right hand person to me, along with Shane Cicero. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through and talk about a number of questions and TikTok and get into the weeds on creative audiences, etc. If at any time you have a question, you can always email myself and I can forward that to David if you have questions after the fact. So without further ado, Dave, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Let's start right out of the gates. And I think one of the things that makes this kind of thing really powerful is getting into the weeds. I think that certainly one of the narratives that's been taking place in TikTok advertising. But you've been advertising in TikTok. We were just talking about it since 2018, right?
Yeah.
So this has been, you've been doing this, and now you manage, how many accounts do you manage on TikTok now?
I'm overseeing around 17 accounts, and then I manage day-to-day manage about 9, and then I have visibility on over 100.
So the difference here of looking at David versus what Cody was running, he's running his brand and that he works with, and David has visibility into a lot of different things. So there's a good difference between these two things, and a good difference of how they might approach it. So I think that we've had this narrative of, there's a lot of discussion on TikTok. There's a lot of chatter that's going on. So what do you say has been an issue of people starting and it not working? What's taking place in a lot of cases where people say, I tried it, it didn't work?
There's a couple things. Number one is, this is not Facebook, and it's relatively a new, immature platform when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So a lot of things that work on Facebook, say, for example, you have a broad audience and you launch a new product and you have your fresh pixel and you spend your money and, you maybe get a sale in the first week, right? Oftentimes how the TikTok side of things works is the system really needs time to ramp up and learn who your customer base is, simply because the way that the pixel works is a bit different than the way Facebook's pixel work, right? TikTok was basically designed and invented under the guise that the iOS 14 was going to be happening. So they built their platform a little bit differently than how Facebook did, which is, kind of spying on everybody. TikTok really isn't doing that in terms of across the entire internet. So you have to look at it from that point of view, number one. Number two is the way that you want to go broad on TikTok. It does take I would say a considerable amount of budget to really get the system to fully understand who your customer is and start really optimizing for that customer. So, same as Facebook does. But the third and kind of the biggest one is, unless you're using some type of software, whether that be a Triple Whale, a Northbeam, or Wicket Labs, or some of these platforms that can look at first-party data, you're probably not going to see that play out within TikTok. And this is a fundamental problem that TikTok has actually acknowledged, is that the advanced matching feature that used to be on the platform prior to September, Shopify actually had either one side says one thing, one side says the other, but regardless, the Shopify integration with TikTok, the advanced matching has been broken. And so you're only looking essentially at 1 day returns within the platform. And for most brands, that's probably not the case. So that's probably the 3 biggest reasons why it's not working. That is sort of the high level. And then we can kind of get into the other ways, which it might be your creative. But anyway, I'll kind of start.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of those things. So right out of the gates, I think system needs time to understand. It was really interesting how you just said that basically it was built in the idea that iOS 14 was going to take place. And I think that one of the powers of it is certainly what you've just talked about, which is the activity it needs for optimization isn't dependent upon the whole web. It's dependent upon the activity that's taking place that you're giving it. And
Yes.
so it's algorithmically understands much better and much faster than Facebook. And let's just say Facebook meaning Meta, meaning Instagram, everything
Yeah.
would, because you're saying, I'm interested in marketing videos or I'm interested in this. So that's something that picks up faster is what you're saying.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So the targeting is better, or like
yeah.
curious on that.
Well, it's very interesting because the way that I would recommend it, say you're just getting started, you're like, you know what, I'm just getting this brand off the ground. You're going to want to have an organic presence. No matter what, you have to have an organic presence on TikTok. If you just, the days of Facebook, of just launching a Facebook campaign and having no Facebook page really and all that, like you need to have that, because that really is your creative testing on essentially free, doing 5 posts a day if you need to, like really kind of getting into that. But when it comes to just the system and the best way to like really work this thing, I know I see a question on this too about like budgets, right? Don't be, whenever I say considerable amount of budget, what I'm saying is, in everything that we do, like TikTok, if you can't get away with looking at your amount of conversions, like you're like, okay, I need 50 conversions a week. And it really is the case with TikTok. Like you need 50 conversions a week for the system to really learn. And until you can get there, think about ways in which you either move it up the funnel, which I hate always saying, but it's true. Getting the system just to start recognizing who your person is, and not necessarily always going for complete payment, but going like, okay, I don't have the budget to spend on acquiring 50 customers at a $50 CPA because I just can't afford that. So I'm going to move it up the funnel and essentially do that as the next steps, right? Of like add to cart or initiate checkout. Now, in that regard, you then look at and go, okay, well, I'm hitting my 50 conversions a week, or, on the add to cart or initiate checkout, then start considering testing complete payment and looking at it on that regard. But don't just think like, oh, it's Facebook, let's go complete payment and rock and roll, because that's how it works, right?
So one of the barriers, the initial question was about barriers to seeing success immediately. One of the things that's an issue is maybe a misunderstanding of the budget or the way that you need to be optimizing initially as things come out of the gate, and that 50 conversions a week being a big part of the initial success. And also having a plan, which is what you aforementioned on attribution, having a plan for measurement, because what you're saying is essentially the advanced matching of Shopify and TikTok, that sort of TikTok conversions API, if you will, that is broken. So you have to have another plan of measurement. So, I think Cody talked about yesterday too. He uses Triple Whale. You could see it, whatever you're using, but looking at it in post-purchase surveys was really helpful.
Yes.
And is that something you see as well, that there seems to be a greater part of that?
Yeah. So I'll give you a really good example. I work with a brand that has a $389 AOV. They sell high-end furniture that has plants inside. If you've been on TikTok, I'm sure you've seen it. It's this furniture company. And, we launched it last year during middle of the pandemic, middle of all of the supply crunch. And we kept selling out. Anyway, we just started posting organically on TikTok, and it worked. And then we got no commerce. And what we did was we launched our TikTok ads, and because of the amount of data that we had coming into the system, we just said, let's optimize for complete payment, because our organic presence was massive. And again, that's sort of a cheat sheet to running optimizing for complete payment. And that's why I'm like, using that sort of loosely of add to cart versus complete payment. If you're organically already there, run complete payment and test it before just doing add to cart, because the system does know who you are at that point, right? Because the organic presence and the ad presence, they go hand in hand. That's why Spark ads is such an important thing. But anyway, what we found was we would have like 3 purchases in TikTok from in Ads Manager. But then when we look at our post-purchase surveys, we would see where's the first place we saw, it would be 27 to 35% on average came from TikTok. And then when we actually crunched the numbers at the end of Q4, we found that over 50% of our users actually saw us on TikTok first before they bought the product. And then the other 50% was like, Instagram, Facebook, friends and family, Google, but TikTok was the overwhelming winner. And our AOV was so high. And so this is when I concluded and asked TikTok, I'm like, why is the system not able to recognize this? That's when they finally go, oh yeah, advanced matching doesn't work. So it was sort of that sort of thing. So all that to say, like, this is a very nuanced, it's very difficult. And like, we can get into the weeds on like bidding and optimizing for the systems. And I think everybody that is watching this, the best way to do that, again, as it always is to test it. But don't be so alarmed if you see 2 to 3 purchases, but suddenly in your back end, you're seeing a ton of purchases or you're seeing a lift. And the other ways to measure TikTok is through both organic search and email. And I'll give you sort of the anecdotal data here is whenever you launch on a new platform, specifically TikTok, measure the date, start the date, understand the date, know your numbers. And then look at it over a 28-day period and over like a 3-month period. Just take those 2 dates. And you will probably see 2 things happen. You will see an increase in organic search, but you'll also probably see an increase in revenue associated to Klaviyo, if you're using Klaviyo or whatever email platform you're using, because you're going to see an increase in new users that are coming from your pop-ups and things like that. And we can directly assign that. And this is across every client that I see. This is how things have always seemed to work. And so what we concluded was, and I put this on Twitter actually yesterday, that TikTok is a really good platform for driving one-day click valuable users, but Facebook is better for longer-term users. And one of the things that is our hypothesis, and this was something that I was talking with a couple of the brands, was people are so used to seeing an ad multiple times on Facebook, right? Oh yeah, I'm gonna see that ad again, I'll just remember it. But on TikTok, you don't know if you're ever going to see that ad again because it's not a chronological feed, right? So it's like if you open the app and close it and open it up again, you can't necessarily scroll back and find it. So what we see actually happening is people are screenshotting it. When they're done on entertaining themselves, they'll go and actually organically go to that or Google it and go right to that website and search for it. And there's no way that TikTok is going to pick up those people. And so that's why you have to look at things in a different way versus Facebook, how people just normally do it.
Yeah, so I think that's, falls under kind of what we have been talking about, which is sort of this idea that the creative on TikTok needs to be educational, inspiring, and entertaining because it fits the platform more natively from a creative standpoint. Let me ask you, if you were to say, the 5 things or the 3 things to distill some of this down right out of the gates, that are tips to it. We've talked about some of them, but tips to TikTok ads that you feel like no one's talking about. One of them is clearly measurement, right? We just talked about that a lot. The one is sort of having a plan for measurement and understanding it may not be a purchase focused, but it may be a lift in other places and sort of assigning that. What are other tips that you would say that are things you haven't talked about as publicly that you feel like no one's talking about in reference to TikTok ads?
Not being afraid to test dark posts. I think that's number 1. Everybody talks about Spark ads. And don't get me wrong, Spark ads work great. But if you have creative testing going on Facebook, don't be afraid to take those 9x16s and run them as dark posts. And what I mean by dark posts, is we're not posting them as Spark ad. We're not posting them organically. And be testing different pathways with that, right? Different landing pages through those organic posts. I'm sorry, dark posts. And we see that work quite a bit. In fact, how I've been able to scale brands on TikTok is using a mix of both dark posts and Spark ads. And I'm always running both at essentially the same time. And because the nature of it is that TikTok seems to approach them very differently. When you post organically on the platform, the Spark ad actually, if it goes viral or it has that sense of going viral, like organically, maybe it's got 1,500 views on it, right? But the other ones have 300. That's a pretty indication that there was something about this that TikTok liked. So turn that into a Spark ad and run it. TikTok already knows exactly what user to serve that ad to. So that's why your click-through rates in Spark ads are higher. Hence why organic is so important. So that's number 1. Number 2 is your email lists that you upload to TikTok. I'm going to put a limit and say 98% of the time, you're going to have a match rate below 1%, even below that. And the reason being is when I talk to TikTok about it, just the system is looking at email and phone number. And a lot of people will put a phone number or an email that's not necessarily tied to their TikTok account. And so the match rates on email or phone numbers are so incredibly low that honestly, it's not worth really doing anything with email lists right now on the platform in regards to that, because it's just going to be a very low match rate, and building lookalikes off them is going to be kind of useless.
Okay.
Number 3, on exclusions, make sure that you're doing some type of an exclusion around your click TikTok ad. Because if you don't, TikTok will start serving to the same people over and over and over again and not get out of that. And I think that it's a problem with the way that the ad auction is still a little bit immature. So what I typically do is if I'm spending, $500 to $1,000 a day, I'll throw a click, exclude click 7, like excluding the last 7 days of people who've actually clicked this ad. And what that means by clicking ad, that means anything from they stop to actually, they basically stop scrolling. That means they commented, liked, shared, anything that stops them from seeing it. And maybe 7 days is a little excessive, but I think it actually controls the narrative a bit more. And that's why I like to do it. And I actually found stability of my ads to last longer that way, because it's not burning out an audience. The next one that I would do, which is actually, it's okay to run a Spark ad and a dark post in the same ad set. And I have found when I do this, that you, again, will get a longer stability, because Spark ads will burn out faster than dark posts. Again, because the system knows who they are and it finds that pool of people and will get all its conversions in 1 to 2 days, and then it will die off. Dark posts will just kind of continue. And it's this weird thing where when I put both of them into the same ad set, it seems like when one starts fading out, the other one kind of picks up for the steam, feeds the signal for a few days, and then you'll see like the weekend, the Spark post will get all the spend again. And then it was just kind of this yin and yang thing. That's another thing that I have found to be something that not really many people are talking about. Is that 4 or 5? I don't know.
That was 4, and if we include our suggestion around attribution, it's 5. So yeah, I think that's super helpful. I think one thing that we haven't said that you said to me right out of the gates that we should have said right at the beginning of this webinar is that your fundamental belief is that it's different for everybody. TikTok experience is different for everybody.
Yes.
And the ads experience and the ad success rate basically is different. That we talked about, common reasons we see challenges with it. We have heard a lot of success from people utilizing TikTok, like Cody, who we talked to yesterday about, here's my playbook. And his playbook was essentially running a creative and running different types of creative that are solving a problem, that are talking about, makeup tips for women over 50, and that kind of creative. Basically, he gave a couple of other examples, driving to sort of a listicle that's easy to click, and then driving to a quiz that is a skin type quiz. Okay. And he's getting the emails at $8 a lead, and then he has back end flows that's making that profitable to bring up the AOV, and he's allowing people on the quiz to add multiple products to their bundles to raise the AOV. Okay, so that's the framework that we talked about.
Yeah.
What are let's just talk about funnels, and we can talk about creative landing pages.
Yep. Yeah.
When we talk about a funnel itself and we talk about seeing success, how often are you doing longer tail email flow stuff? How often are you doing direct response, driving it right to a site? How often are you doing TikTok specific landing pages? And then what are some of the really top performing creatives that are fueling this?
Yeah. So number one, when it comes to sort of how I do TikTok, I do it in a few different ways. I have some clients that they are spending quite a bit of money and they want me to focus on effective cost per click. That's their goal. Again, it works great, right? For me anyway, it makes my job a little bit easier. But essentially, if you're going to get if we're looking at Facebook and TikTok, and our CPM costs are $10 on TikTok versus $21 on Facebook, and our cost per click is $2 on TikTok, but $4 on Facebook, and we know historically that the same user is bouncing about the same amount, why not just effectively go, you know what, let's just drive as many users as we can from TikTok for the time being, right? So that is essentially as easy as that, looking at your cost per click effective rate. Number two is, I actually, believe it or not, and I've done multiple tests on this, but it seems like driving to a homepage seems to work just as effective as anything else across the board. Now, I completely agree with Cody that advertorials and some listicle stuff works wonderful, but I do think it depends on the niche that you're in, right? If you're selling, a t-shirt, I don't think there really is a level of education that you need to do with that t-shirt. People just want to buy it. And I have particularly a product that I work with on TikTok that the brand has over 4 million followers on TikTok organically. And like, we just put up a product page and people will essentially buy the product because it's so effective that way. I think that we have to look at this as a couple of things and understand how users are actually using TikTok versus users we're using Facebook, right? Because there is a very difference in how people use the platforms. When they go on TikTok, they go on to be entertained. And I don't know if that was the case with Facebook, especially over these last couple of years, Facebook or Instagram. It sort of turned into this habit, right? It was more of like, oh yeah, I should go on my Instagram and check what's going on. But it really wasn't this entertaining thing. It was a habitual thing. When you go on TikTok, you are essentially effectively going into the platform to be entertained and get away. So think about that as the mindset. Do you want to drive people down this long funnel to get them in? Probably not. You want to just say, you know what? You like this product, come and buy it. Here's where it's at. And that's how I've done it. I've done a ton of remarketing. I've done a ton of it. But at the end of the day, like, not including all these exclusions and getting all into this, but just saying, like, just serve a audience of people. Don't do a ton of remarketing off of them, and just let them find it and measure this on a click basis to your website and go like, all right, are these users converting? And I think, is my frequencies too crazy? And just be looking at it from more of that approach than I need to drive a lead, then I need to do this, this, and this. Because I just don't know if that's really the way that the platform is intended, that users want to be using it. And again, I could be completely wrong, but that's how
you're saying right now, in terms of overall funnel, to some degree, don't overcomplicate it at this point. If you can, keep it simpler, drive a lot of traffic, and just initially see if you can look at a lift. And if you can, and then look at sort of the cohort of that lift and see what you can determine from there. One person did ask that I think is important. Can you talk about the category of advertisers you work with now? Advertise AOV product types, because that would help kind of contextualize some of the things you're saying.
Okay, so I work with mobile apps, and I work with direct response advertisers doing mainly in the D2C space. Right. And then I also work with a few celebrities to manage their entertainment side of things. For the context of this call, I'm talking mainly about direct consumer products, e-commerce products, not mobile apps, and not necessarily like entertainment products, because I think that that's more of the people that would probably be on this call what I kind of talk about. And then when it comes to the AOV, I do everything from roughly $39.99 all the way up to about $400 and in between. Our sweet spot is probably about 130 to 160 AOV.
And so it's one client is a shoe client. You have another client that's a furniture client. So
a card game. I sell fashion accessories, fashion product like dresses for a high end, like semi high end fashion brand. CPG, so like product, food and beverage. And so, kind of a broad mix of things. So
recapping what you said in terms of driving, in terms of the funnel itself, a lot of what you've seen thus far in terms of funnel is driving people through to homepage has been initially what you're always looking at to see if there's any initial lift. You're not like, here, my playbook at this point is design a specific landing page for TikTok necessarily. or driving them specifically to a PDP or anything. It's
No,
more holistic than that.
Yeah, because again, I want to, before I start digging into, and I think a lot of people can agree with this, is like, look, like if we're testing a platform, I don't want to put design work behind it. I want to do all this stuff. I just want to go like, okay, can my product work on TikTok? And the best way to do that is like, let's just do it the lowest common way. Let's find someone to make a TikTok ad for us. And then let's drive it to the homepage or a product page and see, is this converting? And if it is, if you're starting to see lift, then get into advertorials and all that stuff and take the time to do them. But
Sure.
I wouldn't do that right away.
Just proof of concept. So let's talk about the successful creatives. I think this is a topic that a lot of people want to get into. So what are, obviously making sure that it's organic, making sure that it looks organic, it feels organic, is to some degree on trend with what's happening on TikTok is helpful. Solving a problem for people right out of the gates is helpful. Having some text on the ad is helpful. Not captioning it 100%, but having some sort of guiding text. What other creative principles and what other things have you seen that are huge pieces of, yes, this is going to be really good on TikTok, and this is the kind of thing that you look for?
Yeah. So I did see a comment too in here, and I'll answer that in this, is that I have seen my best performing TikToks have no considerable time matter, if that makes sense. So I've had some of my best ones be 12 seconds and some of my best ones be 43 seconds. And it really doesn't matter on the time frame. It matters on how good and quality it is. And I don't want people just to go, oh, I'm gonna need to go make 12 seconds, because that's really not the case. Really think about more of the quality and start cutting it before you start, oh, it needs to be 12, 15, 16, 18 seconds. So stuff like that. The other thing is you want that first 2 to 3 seconds to be this ultimate thumb stop. It has to have something that's going to grab the people's attention. And that can be as simple as a quick clip that shows the finished product with that text overlay, basically following whatever audience you want it to be. I think Cody may have mentioned that yesterday. But then moving into more of like, here is the product. Here's what it does. Next is cuts, your edits. If you don't make edits and cuts every 2 seconds, people are going to it's going to get too long, and people are typically going to get bored. And I found that to be the true almost every single time. And it's weird. I can't explain it, but that's just the case. If you do influencer posts, and again, here's my caveat. If you do influencer posts and it's somebody talking, let them talk, but put text overlay over it that is changing throughout it every 2 seconds. So that's sort of it's this pattern shift that we're doing. So if it's an edit, I mean, is either it's a cut or it's an edit. And if it's an edit, that means it's a text overlay change. That's all that is. Okay. So
let me interrupt for 2 seconds and say, what percentage of the things that you've seen successfully that creative wise are influencer versus from the brand itself?
Right now, across the board, 60-40 brand.
And so you're talking about cuts before. So are the same restrictions in place with TikTok as they are with Facebook in terms of the befores and afters?
No, I have not found it. I have not found it. So your restrictions are more on the landing pages for stuff than it is on. Okay. But I have on before and afters. I don't find it to be the same as restrictive as. And again, I'm not running weight loss or things like that. That is kind of the issue with that. So I can't really speak to that, but. I have found that kind of stuff is you can usually get by pretty easy.
Okay. Awesome. Quick cuts is a big part of it, every 2 seconds, which is important. Looking at sort of juxtapositions is a big part of it. Any other creative tips things that have worked well?
Yeah. Make sure your music is in 3/4 or 4/4 beats. I don't know why, but like it needs to feel like it needs to move. Because that's something that I've always find work, and I've tested this theory a lot. But make sure you don't run copyrighted music, please. Like, just don't do it. And I'm gonna shout this to the mountaintops, because I'm just protecting people and I'm protecting intellectual property. But essentially, it's a no-no. TikTok and Facebook are both skirting around it, but there is rules in place that you can get technically sued over that. And I want to make sure people are aware of that, because I think people are like, well, I'm going to get away. I'm not a big brand. What's going to happen is you're going to get one ad that goes viral and suddenly things happen. And so just be very careful with that, as well as the sounds you use in your TikToks. Make sure if you find if it's a viral sound that you're going to use, you may want to reach out to the person who originally created that and ask them, hey, I want to buy usage of this sound from you. Can I? But at the end of the day, I always tell people, just stick to, free use music. Don't use sounds that are copyrighted, and you'll be fine. So that's a huge thing. And then the other thing that I'll call out is, for the most part, it needs to feel like a TikTok. I hate saying that, but we always say that. It really does. Like, we see the big difference in it, in performance long-term, by focusing on like making sure that it feels native to the platform. I saw yesterday a jewelry product that was just a static ad with a text overlay on it. I'm just like, this just is it feels such like an interruption. You're just like, so you don't want to have that feeling.
Right. So just make it native. And I think that's something that has been underscored by a lot of things that we've been talking about. And I'm sure we're going to come back to creative, but I want to jump into, well, actually, before I go into campaign structure and talking about audiences and things like that, Courtney, is there anything that you want to talk about in reference to creative, or any questions you have for David about creative and expertise there?
I mean, we've kind of talked through what not to do. Is there anything maybe that you've seen as a user of the platform? I think that's probably a big one, is like, make sure that you're on TikTok and you're kind of scrolling it and understanding the platform as a whole. But is there anything you've seen maybe from other brands that you don't run that you're like, I wouldn't have done that, or just like interesting ideas or anything to stray away from, besides like obviously copyrighted content and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one for me. It really is. Like, I think like the platform is so new that, there really isn't this like, oh, I would totally not do that. I wouldn't run static ads. I really wouldn't. You can run static ads. I wouldn't do it. And then the other thing is, well, one of two things. When you're doing Spark ads, making sure you're not doing duet Spark ads, because again, it's still in beta, and some might have this and some might not, but they're going to take those down because it's not approved by the other person. So there's things like that, whenever you're running organically, always be mindful of those things. Like, if this Spark ad or this organic post takes off, is this going to be okay for me to run this as a Spark ad? And again, I don't want people just to go, oh, I'm only doing organic just to do organic, for Spark ads, but just be having those mindsets. Like, I had one for a client. The post went it had like 1.4 million views, but I think it was a Kendrick Lamar song that had the F-bomb in it. And it was like, you want to use it so bad, and then you go edit it, right? And you go upload it again without, with better music. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like, it missed the magic that it was. But again, it was great. It went viral 1.4, but we couldn't use it, right? And so I think that's really the big one. The other thing is, and I'm huge at this, I basically started this little content outreach program because I just felt that it was very badly misused, is like making sure your contracts are super lined up for how long you're going to get whitelisting for. If you can use their likeness in their post afterwards, like, hey, the whitelisting is expired, but we paid for that piece of content, we can run that as a dark post afterwards. Like, there is a lot of gray area that you want to get a lawyer to build you a contract around that, to protect you and allow you to use that property when you pay for it, right? You want to have it. So making sure that you have those things set up as well.
I think that's helpful framework for people. We have a couple of questions that I want to jump back before we go into talking about campaign structure, and it relates to campaign structure. It's a budgetary question, and it's about this. It's sort of the 50 conversions a week question. So I'm going to try to weave two together. Yep. So person asked here saying, this person has heard you need 50 conversions a week. So assuming you start at 50 page views a week, then you maybe go to 50 ATCs a week, then 50 purchases a week. do you start new campaigns at each level, or do you use the same campaign ads with a new conversion goal?
Yeah.
How do you scale up to the next conversion goal?
Yep.
And in relation to that, you know, how does budget relate to that? Like, what do you need to be able to, if you're saying, from my standpoint, what we've done is we've started everything with 50. We're trying to get to 50 ATCs a week. So we like set a baseline of understanding. And a lot of times that, you know, with the brands that we've been helping, it's not much, you know, so you're sort of testing the waters of like, you know, $1,000 a week type of thing. And you see how many ATCs it can get you. Like that's sort of where we've started. But that you needing it to be stable at 50 is kind of
So I've done this as a test where I've tested page view content, add to cart, initiate checkout, and purchase, all of them to see which one drives the best quality traffic on a new pixel. Okay, I have found that page view and view content, just like Facebook, tend to give you a lot of bounces and not actual quality. So I would urge you to not start there. I would urge you to start at add to cart, initiate checkout as a starting base. And getting 50 conversions there is really, I think that's a good place to start, because what you're going to happen and what's going to see is you're going to start to see purchases start popping up that are attributed back to the ads. But on view content, you're usually not going to see that, and your bounce rates are going to go up through the roof. So that's how I would look at that. But again, as I always like to say, it depends. You might want to try it for a day or two, try page view, and then just look at your bounce rates. If your bounce rates are, you know, a higher percentage on TikTok than they are on Facebook, you know what? Let's move this up, right? Let's get higher quality people in here, and the system's going to learn. When it comes to budgets, I really, how do I say this? If you can't spend any more than say $50 to $100 a day, this is going to be very, very, very hard for you. And I don't envy you, because it's just hard. And anything, Facebook or whatever, you're just not giving the systems enough goals. So in that situation, if you're like, you know what, I have $100 to spend a day, it's my own money, this is my own brand, try it, run page view, and try to optimize your website as much as you humanly possibly can to get that. And then start, what I would do is, once you get that 50 conversions, duplicate that, run add to cart, duplicate that, run initiate checkout. But don't move, because you can't technically move up the conversion window within a current running active ad set. You have to always duplicate it and do that. So that's how I would do that in theory. But yeah, it's never worked for me on page view or view content from a conversion perspective that I'm going to get conversions in that window.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, there's always this idea of like seasoning the pixel, you know, type thing. And, you know, to me, it's like, I second guess myself of which one should I do. So we started low, and then that was worthless. So now we're like trying to move it up. In terms of looking at ATCs, which is good. And I think is a good place to start on campaign structure, talking about campaigns, audiences, how these are built, how many ads you have under each, like audience, et cetera. What audience, so just broadly, how is it structured generally for you? What audiences for you are the most worthwhile? I'm curious of what things seem to be working, with the understanding, of course, that this is really a top funnel channel.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer this question from the idea that you've already been on the platform for a little bit, because again, if you've just started, you just need to do the standard broad and just kind of go with it. Like it really is the best way to do it. Now, to say this, just say you've spent, you know, $5,000 to $10,000 on the platform the last 2 months. Okay. You have somewhat of an organic presence on the platform. Where I'm going to start is two things. One is I'm going to do my creative testing always in a broad campaign, because the system does seem to perform best on broad. Doesn't matter how you look at it, it just performs really well. And there's a reason for that. TikTok's audiences are still very, very, very new. And the system is still, I think, effectively trying to figure out what the buckets to do. So that's number one as a caveat. But number two, again, if you've been spending on the platform, TikTok has this little button called TikTok recommended interests. Do it. It works. I don't know why, it works. and it seems to work very effective across, I would say, of the brands that I'm running right now, every single one of them is doing a broad and a TikTok recommended interest, and doing those at scale. I'm spending $3,000 to $5,000 a day on each of those, and my performance is pretty stable. Now, lookalikes and all of that stuff, I have found that on lookalikes, there is I believe I consider them a 1%, 5%, and 10%. That's how I just in my head categorize them.
Yep.
I do a 10% broad, focused on my engaged ad users. So video view 25%, click as far as you can go back. That encompasses the entire ad account. So you can click a click 180 and it just goes, okay, everybody is in that bucket. Or video view 25%, which I wish Facebook would do, where you could just do everybody and do that. And you create lookalike off your engaged users, number one. And it seems to be a pretty stable place to go. Secondly, once you have developed enough purchasers, I would say over 500 is a good place to start. Start creating lookalikes off of that and running them in what I like to call stacks, 1%, 5%, 10%, and run them in a stack and try that. Those two have been
within a stack under a campaign structure like you would do with a CBO.
Yeah, well, no, I would do it as a
separate deal.
Ad set, one ad set, a 1, 5, and a 10 in the same one.
And so that's what you mean by the stack. So putting them all together. Okay, cool. Okay. To wanting to clarify our vernacular.
And the thing about it is, yes, you can do CBO on TikTok. I would say it's worked for me probably 30 to 40% of the time. That's probably about it. It's not very stable. And the only account that's really worked for me on is the account where I spend the most money. So I don't want to recommend it.
What I'd like to go into now is talking a little bit about doing some screen sharing, Dave. If that's okay with you, in terms of looking at an ad account that you're currently running, and then talking a little bit about attribution in transparent fashion. David is the head of product at Northbeam, an attribution solution. So he is a proponent of them and uses them actively, which is great. So he's going to talk about that a little bit too. But generally speaking, Dave, I think what we want to get into is like, how do you measure TikTok, broadly speaking, right? Post-purchase surveys, we talked a little bit about in the beginning, are helpful. Looking at clicks is helpful. I've seen this so many people say, and myself is like, I see a lot of, 3-second views, or I see a lot of bounces. And I always wonder to myself, like, to what degree is this actually low quality traffic? Or to what degree is it that my landing page didn't match what they were expecting from what the ad said? So how do you determine attribution, and how do you start to think about those questions?
Yeah. So I measure, I measure attribution within a 1-day click. And I'm very, very conservative on it. And I guess I think a lot of media buyers are starting to kind of come around to this idea of 1-day click. And again, it's conservative. So keep that in mind. But if you're looking at from the standpoint of a 1-day click data is going to help understand the quality of the traffic that's coming to your site. And if you can determine what your 1-day click break even is, you will win in an iOS 14.5, whatever we're calling it now, because you're able to understand the relationship between the traffic that you're running on these platforms and the actual data that it's giving you. So like case in point, 2 weeks ago when that deduplication thing was broken on Facebook, I saw it in real time broken. And I saw our attribution within our 1-day click was also being affected by it. And Facebook showing us a 2.5 to a 3x, but then my attribution tool is showing me a 0.7 on a 1-day click. And I know my relationship between the attribution tool and Facebook. I know what it is. And so I was like, this is way off, so I could see it in platform that something was fundamentally broken. So I actually turned all of our Facebook ads down and scaled up TikTok as a result. And we ended up having a really good week because of it. So that's why I like using 1-day click, because it helps you understand that relationship between the traffic that you're sending on a daily basis and also the nuances of this, right? Okay, Monday and Tuesday on a 1-day click are terrible for me, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday are great, you know, it's okay if I have a bad 2 days because we're going to make up for it on the long run. Now, we can get an attribution. We can talk about this all day long, but I want to say one more thing on it is I measure on a 1-day click. I optimize on 7-1, if that makes sense. My decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I use a 1 day as an information. Okay. That's good to know. Yesterday was a 0.6 on a 1-day click. Was it the Facebook ad? Was it the actual ad? Was it the auction? What was it? Let me watch it for another day or two and see. And what we'll end up seeing is, okay, today was a 0.9. Okay, so it most likely was an auction-based thing with audiences. Like I know a lot of us potentially saw issues this week with just what's going on in the world, right? That has an effect. And so that's how I like to measure it. And then when I'm making choices, I look at a 7-day click or a 7-day click, 1-day view attribution and go, okay, actually this ad is doing its job. It's above my benchmark. I can scale it, right? So
do we want to do some screen sharing to talk about that briefly, if you're okay doing that?
Let me share my desktop with you.
Okay, I'll just let you dive in. I think what we're saying is, I think it's, it's isolating. 1-day click isolates in terms of measurement, which is super helpful, right?
Yeah.
Like that, it's sort of neutralizing other factors. So I think that is actually really important to talk about. The one thing I always have differing answers on is, how do you go through the determination of what the 1-day click break even needs to be? Like, I've heard multiple answers. I feel like I have my own way to answer this. How would you answer that? How would you determine that for a brand?
So I typically will answer that based on how much data I have. So if it's like, if I've been running for a year, I start looking back at a relationship of 1-day click in the business and go, okay, on average, if I can hit a 0.78, I know that that's probably going to net out to actually better numbers when I think it is, because it's actually netting out in the Klaviyo over the week pattern or whatever. I'll put it this way. It's very complex, and every business has different objectives to this.
Totally.
Ultimately, if you are good with numbers, you can figure this out by looking and measuring your day-to-day revenue numbers and understanding the relationship of the click data that comes to your site versus the MER data, which is like, okay, a Klaviyo email hit, we did, $5,000 that day, but really only $800 of that came from ads. Okay, we know that our MER is good that day, but our accrual cash or our accrual number is actually bad because the data that was coming from the 1-day click was actually bad, but the day looked great because we drove an email, right? And so I would really know your numbers, put them into spreadsheets. There are tools out there that you can download still to get that 1-day click data from Facebook, for example, and use that as sort of an understanding of like pre-iOS 14, my 1-day click that I was averaging was, in platform was a 1.1. Okay, so I should probably hit a 1.1 or, use those numbers. But the thing about it is you want to set it and be willing to change it as you continue to go into this. Because I have changed for this client, this is a shoe brand that I run. We've changed our 1-day click numbers probably 4 or 5 times, even in the last few months, because we find something new that we didn't think about before, which was like, oh, our email sign-up rate is 2x higher on YouTube than it is Facebook. Therefore, we can get a 0.6 on YouTube versus a 0.9 because we know our email is converting, like there's all these factors.
Yeah.
So this stuff is mind-boggling. You need to have a data person that knows their numbers, that's in there with you. I'm a creative person. I have someone on my team that is really good with the data, and I do it too. But like we balance each other out with this. So anyway.
I'm always just curious of the way that's answered, because I feel like it's a moving target. So feel free to walk through whatever you'd like to here in terms of the structure and the ads that you have running and attribution.
So I'm actually doing a test right now for this client. So I launched this brand on TikTok back in May of 2021. On average, we were spending roughly $2,000 to $3,000 a day to start, and then we kind of ramped up from there. Now we spend between 6 and 8K a day, and I'm trying to get it up to 10 to 12K a day. Definitely a lot higher spend than most people are probably used to, but how I have structured this account is a couple ways. Number one, is I'm just going to show you this month because I think it's helpful. On the month, we spent $179,000, 1.28 cost per click. But I'm going to show you something that you're going to find interesting. And I think this is going to give you, all of you on this call, a little bit of a sigh of relief. Our ROAS is a 1.08 in platform. This is not the true number. It's actually a lot higher than this, but the way that TikTok is attributing it is a little bit less than what you would assume. So this is the way that you measure this, and the way that I measure this is essentially a one-day click. That's how that's basically I've justified it measuring. So just take that as a grain of salt, that's typically how your TikTok is going to look. It's not going to be 2 to 3, 4X's that you would normally see the more you spend. Okay, so that's number one. But the way that I like to structure my account, I'm just going to show you February and filter it by spend. I'm just going to do active for right now, just because I want to show you this, how simple this is. So I did this as a test. Actually, yesterday I launched this just because I wanted to actually talk about it on the call. So at the beginning of the month, I did a creative test where I tested a ton of Spark ads and a ton of dark posts. And I tested them both within one another and without, like as a mix and then on their own. And then as the month progressed, I started adding in an interest audience, ABO. And then I added in a lookalike ABO campaign. And then now at the end of the month, I've compiled all of this data and I know, okay, we've done interest, we've done all these things. Now I'm going to take all of our ads from this month and I want to compile them into the two best, one Spark ad set and one dark post ad set on the Spark ads on cost cap and the dark posts on lowest cost. And I want to see if it works. And why I'm doing this, and this will help explain it. Think of Spark ads as social proof, okay? They're social proofed ads. That's how you look at them, okay? And I'm doing a theory where I'm like, if I can do a cost cap of dark posts or of Spark ads, theoretically it should work and it should get good signals because that's how Facebook works. And so I pulled this off. I actually launched this yesterday. I wanted to talk about it in the call. I have this campaign set up, and you'll see here, it's literally that, a lowest cost and a cost cap, 110 and none. And you'll see I upped the spend. So these have spent about $3,000 so far. The lowest cost has a 55-cent cost per click, and the Spark ads have a $1.26. The CPR 0.82 to 0.44. But you'll look, the ROAS on this is actually higher, okay? And so one of the things that I'm trying to do and want to talk about is lowest cost versus cost cap, number one. I'm a firm believer that if you understand your platform and you understand your brand, cost cap is going to help you a lot better because it will. But I would not run cost cap until you fully realize and understand what your numbers are. So the reason I set this at 110 was because on average for this account, our CPA in platform is 106. So I was like, okay, I'm going to set a cost cap at 110 and start there. Okay. So that's how I kind of determine this. So this setup is, look how basic this is. This is literally a broad top ads from the month. And this is the structure that has effectively worked for me over and over and over every month. Again, let's recap. Beginning of the month, creative test. And once we find the winners, we graduate them to a lookalike test and an interest test. And once we win there, we then gravitate. And once those will essentially phase out, because the ads will phase out, they typically do within a week, just because that's TikTok. We then take all of the winners from each week. And that last few days of the month, we do a bigger budget. And then we run those in broad campaigns with the top. There, like you'll see here, this is the top. This is our top dark posts and our top Spark ads. For the month.
I mean, I think, you know, what there's a little bit of a system to it, which is really powerful. I also think that it's utilizing the power of the interests, the power of broad, the power of the interests or suggested interests, really.
Yep.
recommended interests to a certain point, and then like flowing it into naturally a more broad structure as time goes on, and then having the creative be the lever. It's always funny because you never know in these platforms. Like we know some of the rules with Facebook, or at least what they used to be.
Yeah.
And now with something like this, it's like, how much is the bidding control a powerful lever? How much is we know creative is a powerful lever. And so I think this illustrates that for people, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at this, you're looking in platform, you're looking at a test. I think that's super interesting. How are you measuring this? And maybe it's a good time to look at Northbeam as well.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, I'm not here to, this is not a promotion for Northbeam. This is what I use. It's a great tool if you're spending money. If you want to like get a tour of it, feel free to reach out to the team. But I have found both, Triple Whale and Northbeam are both really good products. I've been using Northbeam for a lot of clients for over a year now, and I've been really impressed with the way the attributions work. So the way that I like to judge things, and I'll run over here, is I put everything in here, and like, say for example, let's just go to this client, since I wanted to show you this. What we see is, you'll see here, this is this guy. We launched it yesterday. So I'll just show you yesterday's numbers, and you'll see that we did a 0.82. Okay. And you look at Northbeam, and Northbeam is showing me a 1.18 and a 0.64. And so the way that Northbeam works is it's not plugged into the API, it's plugged into the clicks. So Northbeam will take your click data and understand how it's attributing. So you can do things such as, you can look to see the hierarchy, but you can also look at the common touch points and the raw data to kind of verify it. But essentially you can kind of like dig in and see like, okay, here's like where it's coming from and what kind of that to like verify this stuff. But I like to use this because it's a good indication of like, okay, yesterday the dark post drove a 1.18 on a 1-day click. In platform, that was actually a 0.85 in Northbeam. This right here is actually above my goal than what I see here, right? And if you look at it, on the day basis, and we can get into, again, we can do demos of Northbeam all you want. I'm just showing you just the relationship here of how I do this. If we look at today's numbers in here, so suddenly that's jumped up to a 1.31, and that's a 0.74. And you look, Spark Ads 1.32 and 0.93. So it's basically it flip-flopped today. And this is what I see routinely with TikTok is Spark Ads take about a day to get going, and dark posts typically will start really hot right away and then kind of die over the next couple of days. I don't know why, but that's what seems to happen. So, but anyway,
well, I think that's and I understand your point. I mean, to me, it's about the decision making and how you're looking at them to be able to pull it up attribution wise. I think that's super helpful to be able to connect the dots. Cool. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. If there's any questions people have, you can email me at Andrew@Foxwell or you can email David@herrmanndigital.com, and we'll be happy to answer those. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge today, and hopefully this has been helpful for people trying to learn TikTok and learn our way into a new platform. So I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.